So if a parent's talking to me and they say, oh, I want to detox and get all these chemicals and heavy metals out, the first question is, how often are they pooping?
So the supplements and even often, I'm just going to say it, the binders, the chelators, right? They're just loading. And parents, you're doing the right thing. By the way, you're doing the right thing. There's just something deeper. That's what Mary and I are here to say. There's something beneath the surface that needs to get activated. These flow systems, the nervous system, these bioregulatory systems have to get turned on first to make that stuff do its job. Welcome to the Experience Miracles podcast, where we help parents find hope, answers, and drug-free help to overcome your child's chronic health challenges. I'm your host, Dr. Tony Ebel, and I'll be sharing my experiences as both a dad and a doctor on every episode. I can take the latest science and neurology of healing and break it down in the most simple and relatable way possible. We'll take on the toughest topics and answer your biggest questions through interviews with other amazing parents and leading experts, leaving you with practical action steps that you can take to help your child heal and thrive. It's time to expect and experience miracles. Let's get started. All right, parents, I love every interview we get to do, but this one right here, we've not covered this topic at all yet on the Experience Miracles podcast. Not at this level, not within this very special deep dive pathway, and not with someone with the experience and the heart and the compassion and the expertise of Mary Coyle, who we are interviewing here today and diving deep into. She is not just an expert, but truly a powerhouse in the world of natural, drug-free healing for kids. We live in this toxic overload, toxic soup, just kind of just toxic load, as we've covered. We have talked about that on the podcast again and again, but we talk about that so that we can say, okay, we've faced it. Our kids have gone through it. How do we get out of it? How do we detox? How do we go through this? And Mary's background is in homotoxicology and bioregulatory therapeutics. Now, say that 10 times fast. I thought I studied some nerdy stuff with molecular biology, genetics, and neurology, and so forth. But this is a topic that you'll learn here as Mary and I jam together. These two systems, getting to the foundation of nervous system regulation, is lock in step with getting to the body, being able to regulate, bioregulate, and then detox itself. There is a pathway to doing this that you really got to dive deep with. And the way you actually dive deep is you make sure you start with the basics first. And that's not something that too many practitioners that are talking about natural healing, that are talking about toxicology, detoxing, and toxins are getting into. So Mary is more aligned, more congruent, and more in the know with what we know, how the body really heals foundationally. And you got to get the foundation first to get the body to heal fully and have a chance at optimal results and recovery. So her ability to break down the complexities of the body's flow system, wait till you hear her talk about the flow system, the layers. She is one of the only experts out there who really understands that sequencing of healing that we talk about all the time. This is seriously going to be a mind-blowing conversation. You're going to love this one. You're going to learn so much about this one. And she's going to help you understand how your child's body is designed to heal, as long as we know how to support it and tap into it the right way and get it working better on its own, versus just try and take something from the outside, whether it would be medication or supplementation, and say, hey, outside in intervention, you do the job for the body. There'll be times, there's seasons, there's certain conditions or phases of healing. We got to do that. But the best way to get healing to happen for your child and your whole family is to tap into the body the way God designed it, which is unbelievably effective at regulation and detoxification, and say, hey, body, do better yourself. That's what this work is actually about. So it's very, again, philosophically aligned and congruent with our work, and it's very scientifically aligned and congruent with our work, and it's truly a 1 + 1 = 11 effect, because through cellular drainage, nutrition, and time-tested homeopathic techniques, Mary's approach isn't about masking symptoms. It's about getting that self-healing, self-regulating mechanism to fire on all cylinders in sequence, in order, and take your kiddo to the next level. And here's the part I really love. Mary knows that when it comes to detoxing, when it comes to supplements, more is not always better. Doing too much too soon can overwhelm your child's system and actually slow down the healing process instead of speeding it up. She's going to show you how to do it safely, strategically, and in the right sequence so you do not get stuck in that cycle with your child, with your family. Get ready to take some notes. This one's awesome. This one goes deep, and in the same breath, this one comes back to the basics of saying, hey, we've got to get the body doing the foundational, essential jobs that it knows how to do: regulate the nervous system, detox, circulate, eliminate toxins. Let's get the body working best we possibly can. And there's ways to do it that are time-tested, been around forever, are completely safe and natural, and wildly effective. And that's what we're talking about here today with one of my favorite people in this natural healing space by a large margin, Mary Coyle. All right, Mary. Well, here we are. We officially get to jam, and everybody who knows us says what we now know to be true as we're learning about each other's work. Like, man, this is together. This is looking at helping these kiddos and these families from the exact same philosophical, scientific, neurophysiological approach. So I would love to dive right into our favorite stuff, the neurophysiology of healing kids. And you've been blessed to work with so many ASD and chronic illness families. And one thing I've always said to kind of position this first question is, because it's true, is when you really do the deep work of understanding exactly, and unfortunately it's a whole multitude of things in a whole sequence of events, when you really understand toxic load, perfect storm, what's causing our kids to get sick, and you understand it in its entirety, if you stay there, that's not very fun. But you and I don't stay there. We go to that depth so that then we know, here's the things we really need to do to get healing to happen. Because when you know the cause all the way through, that is the requisite to get to the solution, right? All the way through. And so the deepest layers of healing really do start with this perfect storm, toxic overload, nervous system dysregulation. It gets locked deep, and our kids' bodies just can't flow through this, right? Communicate through this, operate through this. And so talk us through that flow system, your perspective of nervous system dysregulation, and why to really get healing to happen, especially to get healing started, we got to get started there.
That's a great question. And I think that I will kind of explain this through the lens of working with my son. He's 33 years old, but he was diagnosed on the spectrum when he was 2. And I was in the chemical industry at the time. And I was really concerned about what I was exposed to and how that was going to affect the baby. And I was on a lot of construction sites, and my dad was a doctor. My grandfather was a doctor. I talked to them about it, and nobody really had any answers back in the 90s. Everything's EPA approved. Your OBGYN, your pediatrician, if there's a problem, they'll put a red flag up. So, don't worry too much about it. So when he was born, even as an infant, he was really constipated. And so super colicky. And of course, we were doing all of the mainstream pediatrician interventions. And I would bring him in at the 2-month visit. And the next thing you know, he has an ear infection. So we're giving him the pink stuff, and he's getting all his inoculations. And then we bring him home, and 2 weeks, 2 months later, I take him back to the pediatrician, and he has another ear infection. So that kind of happened between the ages of about 2 months to 2 years. I just kept on giving him the antibiotics, and then we switched out after breast milk to regular milk. He started getting a rash, and he started losing his words. He was very uncomfortable, very unhappy, slow to crawl, slow to walk. So that kind of goes back to what you were saying, Dr. Tony, that this is a total load issue. And in the back of my head, that's what I felt too. Like it must have been something, primarily maybe something that I did at work, that there was transgenerational toxins that were passed down in utero, and that's what affected him. And so that flow system was completely blocked. And now he's using his primary pathway of elimination, that's going to be the liver through the colon through stool. It's going to be the kidneys through urine, the skin through sweat, and the lungs through respiration. Those are when too much garbage goes in, not enough garbage goes out. The body's going to try to find a creative way to get rid of those toxins. So if those primary pathways are blocked, he's going to be using secondary pathways of elimination. So that's going to be anything the neck up. So that's where those ear infections are going to come in. That's where the swollen lymph glands and the strep throat comes in. That's where that rash comes in. He's trying to find an orifice to get rid of these toxins. And we're not giving him any access to that flow system at all.
My farmer, Iowa, when you grow up on a legitimate farm, Mary, you have to know north, south, east, west, just in case you get lost in the middle of a cornfield. This is a real thing. And I do sneak in some farmer wisdom on this podcast, as you know. So the way I teach it to my patients, I don't know that my suburban patients ever know what the heck I'm talking about, but it doesn't stop me from saying it, is if it can't go south, it goes north. Right?
Mm-hmm.
If it can't come out that way, it's coming out nasal, ear, and that's just the way the body works.
Yep, that's an excellent analogy. So that's where we were, and then he was diagnosed with autism when he was 2, and then we kind of.
Can I ask right in there? Because I can't not do my job as a doctor, even on the dang podcast. Can I love details of case histories, and I'm so trained in my brain to pull the granular tidbits. His motor planning. You had mentioned that his motor milestones started to kind of go slower. Did they go even slower, get more off track the sicker he got? The more the constipation, the antibiotics, and if you think back now, did those really collide against each other where his motor, big motor, gross motor, fine motor, sensory motor, did they start to really crash and burn once his flow systems were bottled up?
I don't know if they crashed and burned, Dr. Tony, but I do think that they didn't progress.
Okay.
So he wasn't jumping with 2 feet off the ground when he was 4.
Yeah.
He didn't know where he was in relationship to the ground.
Yep.
So he would go to the end of the slide and he was afraid to jump off of it.
Yep.
He could run, his legs were strong, but he couldn't do the monkey bars, across. So, it wasn't progressively bad, but I could see that the development.
Yeah.
Wasn't.
Yeah. Because it was at that point, his body was so busy taking care of just trying to compensate for the functions that weren't working. So the brain and nervous system were distracted and bottled up, because things were bottled up. And so the progression that's where things slowed and stalled. And so what I love there too, you had also talked about in the motor system, which again, I'm bringing those two worlds together because it's the one I know. This world is what you know best in class. And I love how the two worlds tie together because the gut, that system, it's a muscle. It's a motor system. It needs to move things along. So they are linked. We talk about a gut-brain connection. Well, there's a gut-motor connection. There's a gut-body connection to simplify it. And so in that world, parents have probably heard about how their child has developed these compensatory muscle patterns, right? So their primary muscles aren't working well. So they create these secondary, compensatory movement systems. So what you're really seeing, and we're seeing with your son, is he was creating compensatory elimination pathways, right?
Right.
Wow.
And, when I started to learn about bioregulatory medicine, they talked about the biofields, and I'm working on the biochemical level. And then I'm also trying to work on the structural level, which would be where you're working on also. But I felt like it wasn't getting deep enough. Like at one point, I'm just giving him a ton of supplements and he probably had the most expensive urine in town.
Hey,
I should have figured out a way to bottle that.
Go deep there. That is what 99% of parents on this podcast just said. Whoa, Mary, what did you just say? That's me. That's what we feel. So what do you mean go deeper within this bioenergetics, the fields, and connecting all these dots? What is deeper?
Well, I just felt like, you think of a car, you turn on the ignition and it's going to have a spark. And then that's going to get the engine going. That's going to get the gas moving. And that's going to get your car and the wheels eventually going. I didn't have the spark. That's what I felt I was doing. I was trying to be Darwin in my kitchen and trying to look at labs and always low on C. Let me put some C in. He's high on zinc. Let me take the zinc out. And I realized I really couldn't do it. And I thought, well, so I took the word autism and put it on the side, and
Awesome.
I took the word toxicity and I got a book on toxicology. And I was reading that a lot of people that had sleep issues, had memory problems, had behavioral issues, it was because of an overload of toxins. So that's how I started going into that direction. And I learned about homeopathy from going into, trying to get to a deeper level. So like the biofields or bioenergetic healing is the triggers that then will kind of stimulate the biochemistry that then will stimulate the structure so that they ultimately function better. So it's kind of like it gets the grease off the wall so that the food breaks down better. The chiropractic treatments work better. The speech therapy works better.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I was seeing. And I was curious as to, this was all theoretical, right? I didn't have any parents. I didn't have any really doctors to talk about this. This was just, I talked to, I think of him as a time traveler, Dr. Kratz, that created these HVS lab products. And he explained this to me 30 years ago. And it's actually, I've been back engineering everything he's told me ever since because I didn't understand it.
Did he work with pediatric patients at all?
He was just a pharmacist. He created the line. And then he introduced me to a guy named Dr. Greg Ellis, who was a PhD in physiology. And he was working with the Amish in Pennsylvania. So he said, if anybody knows this product line on how to really, work it clinically, it's Dr. Greg Ellis. And when I went to see him, he was like 6'8". He was wearing like a purple jumpsuit. He was like a telephone booth with a head on it. And he was, and he had stacks of papers all around his little office. And I'm in the middle of Amish country from New York City. And I'm thinking, what the hell am I doing here?
Mm-hmm.
And I asked him questions and he answered every one of them. And I already knew a lot of toxicology at that point. And I just thought, between Dr. Kratz with his product line to help trigger the body to move these toxins out and working with Greg Ellis, talking about the primary pathways of elimination, the flow system, I just felt like I was really on the right track.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love this. Kate, let's go here because we're going to double down. Now, the most important and effective thing you can do to get these kids healing is try and find yourself to a 1 + 1 = 11 effect, right? If we find one thing that works the body to trigger and activate this elimination, this detoxification, this get the bad stuff out effect, if we find one thing, that's awesome. If we find two, goodness gracious, especially when we can link them up. And that's what we're learning about our work, right? Is because just like that biochemistry connects to the structure, to the somatic, to we'll just call it the body to simplify it. Well, the body also connects and signals to the biochemistry, right? And so if you've got sluggishness and overload and overwhelm and dysregulation and dysfunction on either side of that coin, you've got trouble. If you've got overload and dysregulation and dysfunction on both sides of the coin, you've got double trouble, right? So when we see this, what we see all the time is, and actually I'm going to map this out and I know you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And then you'll be able to insert and say, okay, that's where my work comes in. That's where homotoxicology, that's where this work comes in. So we take case histories all day, every day. I would say it's about 80 to 90% of our cases. And I'm not pulling that out of, what, I am very spot on in that 80 to 90% range that families, one, they know about the toxic overload. They know that there was too many toxins going into mom's system during pregnancy. They know there was too many toxins with labor and delivery, too many toxins inhaled, ingested, injected, and then antibiotics, Miralax, you name it. So these families, as you serve and we serve, they're on the hunt they already know that their child's body is loaded with toxins. So their entire focus when I meet them is get these toxins out. Now that's the table stakes, Mary. Now what's next when I look at the paperwork deeper and I do my consult with them, they are just like you were in those early stages until you knew, right? Until you found this, they are surface level having their child have the most expensive urine in town. So the supplements and even often, I'm just going to say it, the binders, the chelators, right? They're just loading and parents, you're doing the right thing. By the way, you're doing the right thing. There's just something deeper. That's what Mary and I are here to say. There's something beneath the surface that needs to get activated. These flow systems, the nervous system, these bioregulatory systems have to get turned on first to make that stuff do its job. And so what I'm saying and seeing all the time in practice is these things just aren't getting deep enough. So they rerun the labs, and guess what? Heavy metal's still there. They rerun the labs, and guess what? Strep's still there, right? So they're spending, honestly, I wish I could say thousands of dollars, Mary, but I know the math on this. It's actually tens of thousands of dollars. They are spending tens of thousands of dollars, especially if they're in New York or Chicago, where you and I are, right? And so how do we do our work together? How does your work to get deeper into that scenario? And how would you teach this to parents to say, hey, you are absolutely, I always say, barking down the right tree, because we're going to get to the roots. It's a very corny tree analogy, but it's actually, we're in the trunk, maybe, right? We're working on the gut. We're working on the microbiome. We're working on neuroinflammation. But there's something deeper with these bioenergetics and this system, is it? So break it down for us, buddy. Take us there.
So as a homeopath, I consult with parents, right? And we work as a team. And a lot of this is common sense. And you explain working from the outside in one of your podcasts so beautifully. And that really is common sense. So we're working at now 4 levels, not just 3 anymore. And we have to think about that. So if a parent's talking to me and they say, oh, I want to detox and get all these chemicals and heavy metals out, the first question is, how often are they pooping? Right? So that's where your work comes in, right? That's where actually the biochemical level comes in. Let's talk about magnesium. Let's talk about diet. Let's talk about the food that's causing inflammation. And let's talk about what we can do on the structural level to look at the vagus nerve to get both the pooping going and also to relax that nervous system. Because when we start moving these toxins out, and they will move out, it's going to go into the bloodstream and it's going to stress out that nervous system. So there's no cheating with homotoxicology. There's no magic to it. Whatever went in has to go out the same way, right? And it's going to be hitting all the vital organs. So that's where we're working from the outside in, is like you talked about mold. I can detox somebody till the cows come home, but if you're not getting rid of the mold in the house, it's like we're putting sand in the boat. I'm trying to take sand out of boat, putting sand in the boat. If they live near a golf course and there's pesticides and herbicides that are being sprayed, if they live near an electrical grid, and EMFs are causing problems. So that's the outside. And then we kind of go a little bit in. What are we putting on the skin? Are there parabens? What kind of sunscreens are you using? Go a little bit deeper. What's going on with maybe the cavitations in your mouth? If you have a lot of bacteria in the cavitations, you have your draw drainage points, that's going to be constantly toxifying you.
And the vagus nerve hates that. Yeah. The vagus nerve cannot stand tooth issues because the vagus nerve is it's connected to the sensory nerves of those roots and of the jaw. And so that'll tick off the vagus nerve in a major way too. 24/7.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yep. Wow. And then some of the other questions are, we have a hyperbaric oxygen chamber. Should we use that? Well, do you really want to put a bunch of oxygen in when the body's really blocked? I mean, the body's going to do something with it, but the idea is it has to go out. Or even infrared saunas. Your first question is, are they sweating? Are they strong enough to sweat? No, they're not sweating. Well, then we do have to wait. And when they start to sweat, then you can put them in a minimal amount of time. So you're always kind of working with those both layers. So, you have to stop sometimes, and then you got to go to the chiropractor. You have to stop. If the kid starts to get an ear infection, stop, go to the chiropractor, get that flow system opened. And so the parent starts to get in my head, and then they can start to see where we're going. But as a homeopath that specializes in homotoxicology, I always want to get to the cell. And that's what Dr. Reckeweg, who created homotoxicology, has said that's the most important thing is the cell. Because you think about it, if you have a clean cell, it's going to divide to make tissues, and that will make organs, and that will make systems. But you can't just go and clean out the cell. Again, the flow system has to be open. So if we get them pooping, we get their vagus nerve working better, we get them sleeping well, we get their diet right, we get them drinking more water, then we got to go in a little deeper. Let's start looking at drainage remedies and look at the liver or the kidney. The drainage remedies are low potency. They're not detoxifiers. they kind of stimulate that organ system. They're herbals that have been shaken and diluted. So they have an energetic quality to them that increases the circulation, the metabolism. So, you want them having some crazy looking poops, and you want them having lots of, urination. You want to have that primary pathway open with those primary organs. Yeah. And then you want to go a little deeper. Let's see what's going on with the extracellular matrix. And that's what's going to be holding all the cells. And that's where all the organs are sort of kept. It's the connective tissue. It's the glycoproteins, the glycosugars. And you want to clean that out because the cells are going to be around that extracellular matrix. And you don't want a dirty extracellular matrix because you're going to have bacteria attached to the cells, antibiotics touched to the cells. Clean that out next. And then you want to go in and you want to use, or in my opinion, what I think are really important are homeopathic remedies that act as catalysts for the mitochondria and for aerobic respiration. Oh. So they've done studies, and there was an article back in 2010 by The Economist that said that the autistic kids, many of them don't produce or have enough oxygen in their system, right? So that's where I kind of get into the weeds of, in my head, what I want to accomplish. I really want that one glucose molecule that they get from their food, and now maybe they're breaking their food down better, to turn into 36 to 38 ATPs. And you need oxygen to do that. And if the body's not working well, it's going to go into something called anaerobic respiration, and only 2 ATPs are made with a byproduct of fermentation. So what's going on with their kids? Well, they're loaded with what? Yeast, ethanol, bacteria, because that's the byproduct of anaerobic respiration, right? So clinically, what I'm looking for is are they eating more? Are they hungry? Yes, they're starving, because now the enzymes are starting to kick this stuff out. Is their hair growing? Are their toenails growing? Can they get a fever? A lot of these kids aren't strong enough to get a fever, right?
It's the best when they do. Are they sweating? Are they sweating? Are they getting a fever? Are they getting,
are they hungry? Are they hungry for something other than carbohydrates? So now they'll say, oh, she's picking up a piece of chicken, or he's never eaten, a piece of fish before. Now those foods look great, because if you have low energy, you're not going to want a piece of fish or chicken. No, you're going to want something that converts to energy really fast, because a quarter of our energy goes to our brain. So these kids are looking for energy because they're just not getting enough. And that's going to cause a cerebral problem.
Oh, first off, when they made me go to school for 8 years and I had to learn all these things like mitochondrial, all about the cell, aerobic respiration, why did they not have you teach me this so it could actually be functional in clinic? Because you learn all this for rogue memorization, but you don't learn any of it for healing and recovery until you get into our work, right? So perfect. So my job as podcast host here is, one, this is my favorite class I've taken this year, Mary. I am loving it. I have my notes here. I will take every one of your seminars for the rest of my days, because this is
don't ask too many complicated questions.
Oh no, I'm coming
on molecular, science. I'm not going to pass that test.
I'm glad you said, because I may or may not have been a molecular biology major in undergrad. So I am.
It looks like I'm going to be asking you questions.
No, but remember, at Iowa State University, so it was still like, okay, let's not overcomplicate this. Okay, so we're still in the heartland here. So I promise I won't. But my job as podcast host here is to continue to go back through your brilliance, double tap on it, and say, okay, mom and dad, here's what that is. Here's what we're saying, and here's how you really understand it. And then most importantly, here's how you apply it. Because what I love also about your work, where we are in full alignment, and the reason we get the results that we do is because we understand the layers. So therefore, we understand prioritization, sequencing, and timing of healing, because we may have the whole long list and scroll of these things all need to happen to heal, but we know in what order, in what layer. Okay. And then even if you know it, there's more. You got to make sure you have signs of healing, deep root, foundational layer healing, nervous system healing, flow pathways healing. You got to know that you have signs that these things are turning on. That's why I love homeopathic work, because it's a catalyst instead of a Band-Aid, right? It is triggering and activating the body to turn things on and do better work yourself body from the inside out. So it's as aligned to chiropractic as anything I've ever seen. And so here's where this works. We have to get deep and turn that on. And so the mitochondria, yes, those kids want sugar, because if you're only producing 1 to 2 units of energy per, input, well, then you need more inputs, more inputs. And the brain is smart. This is actually a sign of the kid's intelligence that they're going to go more carbs, no protein. Once you get these turning on. So parents, here's what I want to recap. So your child is healing, 1, at the deepest layer, and 2, in the right order, when sleep, poop, sweating,
fever,
trying new foods, eating, right? Getting into these new
and the pupils aren't constantly dilated, so they're not running on exhausted cortisol. They've got some cortisol in their adrenals to kick it out, to bring those pupils back down.
I point it out to parents all the time, and sometimes it's weeks into care, and it's like, look at these pupils. The other one, respiration. We'll come back to oxygenation. We're going to go deep onto mitochondria and oxygenation next. And so what we can see from both there's healing on the inside out, plus the structural, the neurosomatic system is chilling, is that kid is no longer breathing through their traps and breathing through their clavicle and their neck, but their respiration is actually getting down into their diaphragm. Remember, those are next door neighbors. The nerves that control the liver, the kidneys, the excretion, the elimination, and digestion, they also control respiration. That's how deep the diaphragm is. And so if we don't activate any of these neurological bioenergetic pathways, we don't get any of these core foundational functions. So I wanted to map those out, and I want to triple tap on this through a story. You'll love this. I don't know if I feel like I maybe told the details of Evan's story on the podcast, but my very first 3-year-old, full, using medical terminology. We don't use this stuff, but it'll make the story more relatable to our audience. Level 3 autism diagnosis, right? Severe, nonverbal, regressive, no words, motor planning, fell all the time, hit his head all the time. Well, when you dig into the case history, it wasn't just the social communication brain-based stuff. He was constantly, he pooped once a week, and that was with, a truckload of prunes and everything and probiotics thrown at him. He literally never had a fever in his life. So these are things that I knew to pull out of the case history with our little man, Evan. Not so little anymore. This is going back 15 years. And after the first week of adjusting and activating his vagus nerve, I'll never forget it. On the 4th day, Mary, he spiked a 104.8 fever. And he was 3 years old. And I went, yes, celebrate, throw a party, because he's got an infant's immune system and fever system. So we need to go back to that to get it back on inside out. So we didn't adjust him. He actually checked clear 3 days in a row, and that fever ran 3.5 days. As soon as the fever broke, he went to diarrhea for 4 days. 4 days of nonstop detoxification. So really add those two up: 4 with fever, 4 with diarrhea. So for a week, I watched this kid literally detox. And I had studied all this stuff just like you, but I needed that case to heal in this deeper layer, in a very specific neurophysiological, let's get the elimination systems on first, and then we can get healing from there. I needed to see it in real life to make sense of the science, if that makes sense. And so it was just God's blessing for me to have Evan be my first ever 3-year-old to heal in that way. And it was like, man, now we have momentum, because back to your layers, right? Now those foundational layers were working for him. So he had greater efficiency. He had greater mitochondrial recovery and energy. His motor planning became more endurance. So, okay, catalyst. Let's go, and in your brilliance, take this homeopathic philosophy of getting these to not do the job for the body, but be the catalyst for the body. Can you give us a breakdown of that, how that works, and why it's so important, both short and long term, to teach the body to do it that way?
Sure. But first, I'm going to speak a little bit to what you just said about Evan. I think that it all is a matter of levels of toxicity, because, you talk to some parents and they say that their child went on a gluten and casein-free diet and recovered. They had bowel movements. They started kind of waking up. Their fevers, were coming in and out, and their diet opened up. Some kids with the methyl B12 shots, helps with that methylation system. I usually are going to get the kids where they've tried a lot of stuff and nothing's working. And I just think that it goes back to the intracellular toxins, right? Point. So the toxins are building up, and then they're getting into the extracellular matrix, and they're crossing over that lipid membrane and hooking onto the mitochondria and the DNA. So it's kind of like the sand is just filling up the boat, and the boat is slowly sinking. So, body might be starting out at 100%. Now it's 90%, 80%, 70%. Once we have more microbes in our body than cells, right? So 10 times more non-human cells than human cells. So when the energy is low, what's going to happen is that we're going to get microbial overgrowth, because when we all pass away, we have zero energy. So the microbes are going to take over our body 100%. So if a body's working at 60 or 50%, you're going to have a 40 or 50% microbial overgrowth, right?
Yep.
So there's just a lot of things that, again, we have to work on all 4 of those levels. And then that might work for some kids, but then when they get to the point where they've tried everything and nothing's working, it's like, all right, let's just open everything up. Let's put some of the catalysts in. Awesome. So I'm always thinking about 4 levels when I'm working with the kids. They say in homeopathy, anything, and I'm not sure if this is actually true or not, but I'm going to go with it. Anything greater than a 12x frequency, so that's something that's been diluted and shaken 12 times in 9 parts of water each time. That is going to be intracellular. Okay. So the homochords I use to detox to help the body, assist the body to get rid of these toxins, they're really just signals, right? They're a 10x frequency to a 200x frequency in one bottle. So it's different than classical homeopathy, where you're looking at one potency and one remedy. You have a lot of different constituents in each bottle. So like, for instance, this is one of the products that I've been using. It's got Krebs cell intermediaries in it, each one from a 10x to a 200x.
I see.
So it's going to stimulate aerobic respiration and mitochondrial function, right? So I'll put that in the biosode, or I'll put in Guna cell. And then now remember, the body, when it gets a little bit of health, it's going to naturally want to get rid of these toxins, right? It's got 3 million years of evolution that knows this stuff shouldn't be in here.
Yeah. But it needs the signals turned on to even know that they're there. In a way, this might sound a little too weird, but when you have this level of deep, 4 layers deep, dysfunction, dysregulation, the nervous system, no system is connected, and the body doesn't know it's there. It can't get rid of it. It's not aware that it's there.
Because you can say, are they potty trained? Like, no. And I'm like, well, don't potty train them yet, because they're between their head and their urinary bladder, their head to their colon, it's 10 miles apart. So let's just get the cell-to-cell communication in, which means we have to get this junk out of the cells. We need to get the extracellular matrix cleaned out, and then we got to get the communication in. Bam. And then as soon as that happens, that's when they have to do the body work, because we've already lost a lot of time. Yep. So that's the first line of defense. When you start with me, other than the vagus nerve, if you need magnesium to kind of open things up, the diet, then I'm like, okay, now we gotta go in, because we're racing against the clock a lot of times. We are. So then the next part, so I use a catalyst to stimulate mitochondria function. In my head, I see the little cells wake up, and they're like, what's this yeast doing in here? What's this bacteria doing in here? Get it out. So it's going to leave. It's going to go into the lymph system, our garbage collectors, and then it's going to circulate through all our main organs. So they suggest with bioregulatory therapeutics to have 2 drainage remedies. So the low potency, right? So you might do a kidney drainer and a liver drainer to keep that flow system going, right? So then you might want to do...
If you're going to do the first layer there, you need to have this ready to go too.
That's right.
Okay.
So now you're kind of pushing things through. The organs are stimulated. They're pushing the toxins out. Then you probably would consider using an herbal like cat's claw or olive leaf or berberine to break it down. So you're working now on the biochemical level. And then if they're not constipated, if they have good bowel movements and whatever, you can put in a sponge, but not, I usually don't suggest every day a sponge. I would just do it every other day or maybe twice a week, just because the stool is going to be pretty toxic as these toxins are moving out. And you want to keep that transit system going. So you don't want anything to block it. And then, I kind of get, this is from Dr. Kratz, who's the one that created the HVS Labs line. I said, well, what do we go after first? And he goes, well, I think of the immune system being suppressed mostly from xenobiotics, the man-made stuff, right? So that's the center of the onion, heavy metals, chemicals, radiation. So if the immune system's suppressed, well, we're going to go back to secondary microbial overgrowth. So you're going to see yeast and parasites and bacteria and allergens and antigens go up. But I don't really consider those as the problem. I consider that if the immune system's working well, it's not a matter of getting rid of the yeast or getting rid of the bacteria. It's making the immune system work well enough so that it can manage that. Because if we all went on a beer and pizza binge for 2 weeks, we're going to have stinky stools. We're going to be silly. We're going to be foggy. We're going to look for carbohydrates. We're going to be itchy and rashy. But we don't necessarily have to take an antifungal for that. We can just go back on a good diet and get our immune system working better.
You could just
again, and this is that's what I love about your podcast, is that this is what you're talking about is so much common sense.
Yeah.
And I think that once the parents get it in their head, they become better consumers of what do we go to next. And if we can get their bodies working from 60% to close to 100%, there's going to be a lot of things they won't need. But then we can fine tune what they need. Maybe they're going to need, a lot of these kids need auditory processing. So it's kind of like throw your money there, do tomatis, do vision therapy, after you're done with the chiropractics, go into all that, then go into fast forward and get the auditory processing sped up.
Yeah. Yeah. I knew this was going to happen during this podcast, where I was going to be like, I don't know how to, because again, I feel like, my job here as the podcast interviewer is to ask the right questions and then to double tap on the brilliance and make sure. But this is so brilliant. I don't know how to say anything better than that. And it's just so aligned with, and when I say our philosophy, sometimes people get weirded out by the word philosophy. Our philosophy comes from our understanding of science. That's what this really is. They're not actually, in our world, the way we see it, they're not separate. It's one thing, right? That comes together. And so as you go through this, it's just so incredible to say, because that was going to be my question, and then you answered it. But the only question I had remaining was, how do you know where to start? There's so much. We take these case histories. You and I are definitely so often taking on the toughest of kiddos, because again, it's awesome. My goodness, if your child's storm load dysfunction was only, and we don't mean to minimize this either, just contrast against what's coming after it. But if it's 1 to 2 layers deep and you go gluten-free, casein-free, you take the core supplements and you do some easy binding and your kid comes out of it, my goodness, we are the happiest in the world for you. There's just a lot of kids where their storm went all those layers deep. And so those supplements, those binders, the MNRI, the lasers, the stuff you and I love, it just doesn't get deep enough. And so neurologically focused chiropractic, homotoxicology, that's deep. And the deepest layer is this, not doing the job for the body, right? Your perfect analogy was the strep and the bacteria and the things that, and the yeast that are in there. Okay, well, we can go, well, let's target them and get them out of there. But you and I go, why? Where is the dysfunction that allowed that to be there in the first place? If we don't go deep and fix that, we'll just be back here in 3 months, or we'll be back here in 6 months, or whatever it is. And so this kid never fully heals. That's the most chiropractic thing I've ever heard a non-chiropractor say. When you taught that, we always give ourselves, we joke with our parents, like, we're the annoying toddler. Even from a neuroscientific perspective, we always ask the next question. If X, why? What's below that? And eventually you'll get to that deepest layer of dysfunction, and you don't do the job for the body with an adjustment. You don't do the job for the body with what you do. You serve as a catalyst and a spark, right? Your analogy before.
Yeah, that's exactly. And then when I talked to Dr. Greg Ellis, when I was working with him 30 years ago, we were using nystatin. And of course, he's talking about detoxing, and I'm like, "Is this stuff safe?" And he goes, "It has a perfect safety record. Nobody's ever died on homeopathy. It's a self-regulating system. If I'm going after heavy metal and the body can only get rid of 3%, that's all it's going to come out. So it's not working on the biochemical level where the dose makes the poison. So if you eat, a whole cup full of chelators or a whole thing of Tylenol, you'd have to get your stomach pumped. But with homeopathy, if you drink the whole bottle, you're just going to release whatever your body's capable of releasing."
And that's
So I was worried. I said, "Well, is this stuff safe, what you're doing?" Because it was so new to me. And he was taking nystatin, and he kind of looked at me sort of quizzically like, "Well, I would be more concerned about, all these months he's been on nystatin." And I said, "But why?" And he says, "Well, let's think of a tree. A tree has fungus growing on it. You can spray it with an antifungal or fungicide, and maybe 2 weeks later it grows back. So you spray it with your fungicide, but it's not working anymore. Now you got 2 fungicides, and now you spray it and it goes away. And then a month later it comes back, and now you're using 3 fungicides because the other 2 aren't really working that well. You're combining them." And he goes, "And every time you spray the tree, you're making the tree weaker." He goes, "Mary, when are you going to stop spraying the tree and making this tree strong enough to deal with its own fungus?"
Yeah.
And that was like, just little stories like that. It's like, okay, I got it.
Yep. Yeah.
I got that.
There's an old school, goodness gracious, I just can't un-Midwestern myself, can I? When you share that story, I had a mentor, he wrote a book called Life Without Fear. He wrote many chiropractic books. Shout out to Dr. Morgan, our podcast producer. He's from the great state of Wisconsin, Dr. Fred Bard. So just picture a small town, voracious, large man, full of brilliant, full of confidence, philosopher, chiropractor. And he used to tell the story of the rats in the dump. You got a dump behind a restaurant, or, as a farmer, this was a very relative story, and so they throw out all the food at the end of the night. Well, the rats are going to set up shop and live there because there's food coming every night. So the restaurant owner goes, "I can't have these here. They're getting into the kitchen." So they put out rat poison, and so it takes care of it once. And 2 weeks later, the rats are back, and the rat poison is their appetizer because they adapt. They eat that too, right? And so now they're harder to get rid of. And I'm about to, I have a whole outline ready to go. I don't have the title figured out yet. Dr. Morgan and I have been working on it, but to really talk about this conversation of how different are supplements from medication. On one hand, massively different, right? They're not pharmaceutical. They're not chemically engineered. They have, and again, I'll save this for that episode, but they are different in that way. But in terms of the clinical approach to healing, how different are they? If we're just saying, take this supplement for this system that is malfunctional, or take this supplement for this symptom that you don't want. Philosophically, which also then means scientifically, they're more alike than they're different. Whereas our two worlds are literally significantly different from medicine, right? And this outside in approach. So I have one question here towards the end that I don't want to ask because I study this all the time and I don't like the results. But I know your brilliance and I just want to ask your brain on it. Why are the man-made toxins, xenobiotics, goodness, and you have a background in chemistry or chemical world. I remember that now when you said that earlier. Why are those so much worse? Why does the body struggle with the man-made stuff, crap, toxins the most?
Well, I just think that our bodies aren't evolutionarily designed to know what to do with them. And so, it gets into our system. And if we have good eliminative systems, once it gets in the bloodstream, our body will figure it out and usually will kick it out. So if we had, been exposed to, whatever it was, the body's going to figure this out. But if we keep getting loaded up, like you were saying, the total load, which I know is a big, thing for Beth and documenting hope, then I think that the blood can't allow a lot of toxins in it because it's circulating through all your main organs. So it's going to be tucking it in. And then it's going to start to kind of go into warts and hemorrhoids and things like that. The body has all these great mechanisms of trying to protect itself. And then when the body's strong enough, it's going to say, oh, what's this heavy metal doing over here? What's this pesticide doing over there? It's going to mobilize it out. But if we're getting all these if these babies are getting transgenerational toxins, and then they're getting toxins, as infants, and then we're doing a lot of other crazy things with them and the GMOs and whatever, it's just, their bodies just don't have a chance to, and then the immune systems get rid of it. The immune systems suppress, and then the microbes become opportunistic. And of course, medications are fabulous when you need them. I mean, a round of antibiotics or for strep around, that's going to be fine if the body's healthy. There's a place for all of it. That's in the biochemical level, and they're important. But, I think if we look at the whole picture, we don't have to keep, just fixing the body with a hammer.
Yeah. 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 Brilliant. Okay. I lied, which is usual. Kind of like when I saw my team sent me this last night. It said, I'm going to stop saying long story short, and I'm going to start saying short story long. And they sent it to me, and they're like, you should tell your podcast listeners that when you mean long story short, you mean short story long. And so same as when I say last thing, I'm actually just like in my last 5. It's just like a slow shot clock that comes to it. So why this is a big one. And even if we just kind of have this as a separate snippet here, why can behavior and emotions, I know this is so commonplace for you, but I think it happens so often. It usually needs to happen to at least some degree. So we need to talk through it again and again. Why can emotions, behavior, even seizures, and those things get worse as a kiddo's body is detoxing and getting better?
Well, that's a really good question, because I don't get a lot of questions on emotions. But when I start that biosode, the catalysts, I do warn the parents that they're going to have big tears. They're going to come out. You could say, go brush your teeth. I think that, well, one is the toxins are being released and the hormones are starting to come in. I also think that they're not connected to their body. So they feel something, but they don't know how to access it. So I'll say that, don't be surprised if you walk in the room, because the mirror neurons are going to turn on. And if you're smiling, don't be surprised if your child smiles back. Or if you're upset about something, don't be surprised if they have a puzzled look on their face, because now they're starting to connect with their hormones, with their feelings. All that's coming in. And we hold on to toxins, and those go in our cells, but also trauma does too.
Sure does.
So when sometimes with the verbal kids, once I start using the catalysts, homeopathics, I'll say to them, they might start talking about something that happened in the past. And they might just burst into tears, and you're just like, Jim, why are you crying? I miss the dog. Well, the dog died 3 years ago. Or I don't like Mrs. Schultz. Well, she was your kindergarten teacher. That was 2 years ago. So all of a sudden they're feeling stuff. They're putting 2 and 2 together, and they're just become, these little pieces like Pinocchio are now all coming together, and they become these whole children.
Yes. That's brilliant. Perfect. Oh, the Pinocchio. I never thought of the Pinocchio reference in that. That is, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. It all starts to come back together, doesn't it? And that is, there can be some emotional, behavioral bumps in the road for that. But we always just want to leave parents understanding, the alternative to this, which is some of these changes like this coming during the healing process. The alternative is to staying stuck. To stay right where you were, to no change. The only time clinically we get nervous about a kiddo and we're like, stumping, I can't, pull my hair out. There is none. But, scratching the beard and going like, what are we missing here, is when no change happens. That doesn't mean the first phase of change is so sunshine and roses, there can be some bumps in the road to that, but my goodness, we're on the road to recovery, we're on the road to healing. Something is happening. We've been able to catalyze the body from the inside out and get it working better. It's now connected. It's now aware that the toxins are here. It's now aware that the trauma was here. It's now aware that the injury, the birth trauma was there. It's now aware, oh my goodness, I'm 5, but I didn't go through these emotions that a 2-year-old was supposed to. I didn't go through these sensory seeking motor patterns that a 2-year-old is supposed to. So the coolest thing about the brain and the body, when you connect it and you get this internal work going that we do and Mary does, is it speeds itself up to recovery. I am always blown away by how fast a child can actually heal and recover when you, 1, go to the deepest layer, 2, take your time to go in the right order and sequence. And so what may seem slow at first, once you get into those deep layers and you go into the right order, oh my goodness, fast and speed of healing and recovery is going to come fast. And it sounds like I'm talking on both sides of my mouth, because there's also the 6th principle of chiropractic is healing takes time. But yes, we're going after this massive goal of getting full recovery, but you'll see so much speed happening throughout the middle phases when you know where to look and how to look and in what layer. I love how you teach that, the 4 layers, just absolutely brilliant. So Mary, the actual final question, and I don't want it to be, because I just want to keep nerding out and jamming on this stuff, because we really do get to experience miracles with these kids, don't we?
We do. And yeah, and I loved how you were saying that, they don't come out at their age. If they're 4 years old, they're going to come out at 2.
They are.
And they're going to give their parent a run for their money.
They are.
And, they're going to think it's hilarious to, strip down and run outside and have you chase them, but that's what a 2-year-old does. So, we have to embrace those things. And I think that a really experienced practitioner that can show that the healing looks weird, right? And if they see that this is on the sheet, this is what we want to see, because things are shifting now, and then they start to, embrace those changes.
Yeah.
But if you don't explain it to them, it's very confusing, right?
No, isn't the clinical work we do, I know it'll sometimes make our brains overheat because we love to study and love to dive deep and ask questions of our mentors and everything else and dig into the research. But that job's a little bit easier than the communication and the explanation, isn't it? It's really the toughest job, most important job. You can't say both are important. Back to our 1 + 1 = 11 effect. When you can clinically know what to do to get this kiddo healing, that's one thing, but then you need to be able to really be effective at communicating and explaining it. Even hey, this is going to be this, but here's why, and here's what this means, and we're going to celebrate this, and that's worth its weight in gold. And honestly, that's why we started this podcast, because we knew, hey, we've figured this out. We do know what's causing our kids to get sick. We do know the deepest layers of unlocking, catalyzing, and getting their nervous system and their immune systems and their detox systems healing again. We do know what order to do it in. And for whatever reason, God gave us the ability to be able to communicate that and articulate that effectively. Even if a Midwest farmer directional rats in the dump story makes its way into the conversation.
That one.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a good one.
It is a good one.
I'll send you Dr. Barge's book, Life Without Fear.
Oh,
It
I
will
love
be
that.
It'll be the most aligned book. It's from the 1970s, and it's as relevant, probably more relevant to today than ever before. So,
wow. Thank you.
all right, my friend, for our crew to learn more from you and to maybe get care from you, where we'll put in the show notes too, but just let them know verbally, where do they find you? Where do they get connected?
You can just go to my website. It's www.realchildcenter.com, all spelled out. And my email's long. It's wellnessny@realchildcenter.com.
Awesome. New Yorker. You guys, every time I think of Chicago, people are pretty highly charged. And then I travel a little bit east and I think, okay, you know what? I'm pretty laid back. All right, my friend, you're the very best. We love you. Everybody tuning in, be sure to, we do say this all the time on the podcast, but this is one I want to really send you down the road of homotoxicology and this work. It is the most aligned of any other, I don't want to call it intervention because we look at it, but it's the most aligned path to healing with PX Docs and chiropractic care that is out there. So from me and our team, go deep. You can't learn too much about this. We want you to really understand it, have access to it, and really make sure if your kid needs it, get after it. So Mary, thank you. God bless you. And,
thank you, Dr. Tony. It was really a lot of fun and a great pleasure. And I always learn a lot from you and your podcast. Thank you for all you do for our community.
You got it. We love it. All right, everybody. Have a good one.